What if your biggest enemy wasn't the world, your job, or your situation, but simply the choice to do nothing? Every day, millions of people wake up with big plans in their minds, only to push them aside with the same quiet sentence. "I'll do it later." Alex was one of those people. Not lazy by nature, not someone who didn't care, but someone who had slowly fallen into a rhythm of delay. A student in his early 20s, Alex had always dreamed of doing something meaningful with his life. He had ideas, goals, and even talent. But over time, his energy began to fade. At first, it was small things, skipping one class, pushing back one assignment, staying in bed a little longer each day. He told himself it didn't matter. "I'll catch up tomorrow," he'd say, but tomorrow kept moving further away. His mornings became slower, his nights filled with guilty scrolling through videos and articles that gave him comfort but stole his time. He watched videos on success, motivation, and change, and then did nothing about them. The more he delayed, the heavier everything began to feel. Not just his body, but his thoughts. Even the idea of starting something, a small task, a new habit, a simple stretch, felt impossible. The worst part, Alex didn't tell anyone. From the outside, he still smiled, laughed with friends, and posted photos that made it seem like everything was fine. But on the inside, he was tired. Tired of his own excuses, tired of watching time pass, tired of being stuck in a body that wanted to move but never did. Laziness isn't always obvious. Sometimes it wears the mask of rest. Other times it pretends to be planning, endless planning with no action. Alex had lists, calendars, and apps full of reminders. He knew what he needed to do, but knowing wasn't enough. He would sit at his desk, open his laptop, and stare at the screen. Then he'd click away, open something easier, maybe a game, maybe a short video. 1 hour became 2. The day ended and the task was still untouched. He felt bad, but not bad enough to change. And that feeling, that space between guilt and action, became his daily reality. People around him would say, "You're so smart," or "You're lucky to have so much free time." But Alex didn't feel smart or lucky. He felt stuck. Some nights he would lie awake thinking about everything he could have done if only he had started. That book idea he had in high school. The fitness goal he promised himself in January. The job application he saved but never sent. They were all still there, waiting in the back of his mind like unopened doors. But every day that passed made them feel further away. He told himself, "I'll change." But change didn't come because change needs movement. And movement needs a spark, something more than guilt. That spark wasn't there yet. He'd wake up, feel the weight of his tasks, and choose to snooze. One day he slept until noon. He woke up in a panic. Half the day was gone. He skipped breakfast, sat at his desk, and opened his email. There was a message from his professor. "Alex, I'm concerned about your recent absence. Please come see me." His heart sank. It wasn't just about the class anymore. It was about what kind of person he was becoming. Alex closed the email, stared at the wall, and felt something strange, not sadness, not fear, but silence. It was as if everything in him had gone quiet. In that silence, a single question appeared. What am I doing with my life? It wasn't a dramatic moment. No loud music, no sudden epiphany, just a soft, honest thought. And that thought stayed with him, through lunch, through dinner, through another night of half-sleep. The next morning, something shifted. Not much, but enough to sit up straight instead of rolling over. Enough to brush his teeth instead of reaching for his phone. Enough to open his journal and write even just a few words. "I feel stuck, but I want to move." That was all. He didn't write a master plan. He didn't promise to run a marathon or build a business in 30 days. He just wrote what he felt. And in that small act, that simple admission, something real began. Because the truth is, laziness isn't a disease. It's not who you are. It's what happens when your hope is buried under fear, doubt, and delay. And sometimes the way back isn't a big leap. It's a breath, a word, a first step. That day, Alex made one rule for himself. Do one thing. No matter how small. He looked around his room. Clothes were on the floor. Old papers piled on the desk. He stood up, picked up one shirt, folded it, and placed it in the drawer. That's it. No applause, no breakthrough, just one thing. But for Alex, it was different, because he had done something. And in that tiny action, there was power. He started noticing other things he could do: wash a dish, throw away an old paper, stand outside for 5 minutes. And each time he reminded himself, it's okay to start small. He didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to move. That was the beginning of everything, not the end of laziness, but the start of momentum. And momentum, once it starts, has a way of growing. Even the smallest action can lead to the next. And sometimes it's that first folded shirt, Not the finished book, not the gym membership, not the perfect plan that marks the true beginning of change. For Alex, it was just that. And for anyone watching his story, maybe it can be the same. Because if you're waiting for motivation to strike, you might wait forever. But if you can act, even once, even a little, you create your own reason to keep going. And in that moment, laziness begins to lose its grip. Alex didn't become a new person overnight. Change wasn't a magical transformation, and it didn't come with fireworks or dramatic speeches. It came with quiet mornings, slow progress, and countless moments where quitting would have been easier. But the question that had first stirred inside him, "What am I doing with my life?" kept returning like a compass, pointing him forward. He began to notice how often he made excuses, simple ones. "I'm tired, I deserve a break, I'll feel more motivated tomorrow." But the truth was, he never felt more motivated tomorrow. He started to understand that waiting to feel ready was the trap, so he stopped waiting. He began working with what he had, not much energy, not much confidence, but just enough desire to change. He created a rule: if it takes less than 5 minutes, do it now. That rule alone began cleaning up his space, clearing out mental clutter. Each small task became a victory. He didn't treat them like chores anymore, he saw them as proof that he could act. He also started writing more. Not pages and pages, just a paragraph each day about how he felt, what he wanted, and what he did. It wasn't always positive. Some days he wrote, "I wasted time again," or "I feel stuck." But even that was better than silence, because the act of writing made his feelings real. And once they were real, he could deal with them. Soon, Alex started noticing patterns. He wasted time most often after he felt overwhelmed. Too many tasks at once made him freeze. So he changed his approach, one task, 1 hour, one step at a time. He used timers. He made checklists with only 3 things per day. He stopped pretending he had to do it all, and that made all the difference. Suddenly his days felt manageable, not monstrous. He also took breaks, but real breaks, not endless scrolling, but walks, music, breathing, stretching. He realized that rest wasn't the enemy, mindless avoidance was. And rest done right actually gave him more energy to work. Over time, his self-image began to shift. He no longer thought of himself as lazy. He saw himself as someone in progress, someone learning how to take control. That shift was subtle but powerful. When he stumbled, he didn't say, "I'm failing." He said, "I'm adjusting." It became easier to return to his goals, even after setbacks. He stopped judging himself so harshly. The inner voice that once whispered, "You're not doing enough," was now saying, "You're doing better, keep going." This wasn't a journey of perfection. It was a journey of persistence, and the more he practiced, the more natural it became. Eventually, other people noticed the difference. His friends said he seemed more focused, more present. His professor complimented his recent work. His room, once a mess, now reflected clarity. But most importantly, Alex started trusting himself again. He no longer needed to be pushed or reminded. He was becoming the kind of person who moved on purpose. And with every step forward, he left behind the old version of himself, the one who waited for life to happen. Now he was choosing to live it. Even as Alex began to change, the path ahead wasn't smooth. Some days still felt heavy, and old habits waited patiently at the edge of his progress. One bad night of scrolling could easily lead to a sluggish morning. One skipped task could spiral into a quiet feeling of failure. But this time, something was different. Alex no longer saw these moments as proof that he couldn't change. He saw them as part of the change itself. Real progress, he realized, wasn't about never falling, it was about getting better at standing up. He began using the setbacks as signals. Instead of saying, "I'm lazy again," he asked, "What led me here?" He became curious instead of critical, and curiosity opened doors. Alex noticed that when he didn't sleep well, everything became harder. So he began protecting his sleep like it was part of his job. No phone in bed. No screens an hour before sleep. He read, he stretched, and he let his body slow down. That one change made his mornings smoother, and smoother mornings made the rest of the day easier to face. He also paid more attention to what drained his energy. People, places, even apps, some of them left him feeling scattered and tired, so he made quiet adjustments, muted distractions, set boundaries, not perfectly, but better, and better was good enough. One Saturday afternoon, he found himself in the middle of cleaning his kitchen. As he scrubbed the counter, a thought crossed his mind. "I didn't plan this, I just started." It surprised him how naturally he had moved into action. No big plan, no debate, just motion. That's when it hit him. Discipline wasn't always about control. Sometimes it was about removing the decisions that lead to delay. He made his environment easier to work in. left his journal on the desk, not in a drawer, put healthy snacks at eye level, turned off notifications during focus hours. He didn't force himself to feel motivated. He just cleared the path so action felt natural. And with each smart choice, laziness had less room to grow. Alex started to trust that even when he didn't feel like it, he could still begin. That trust became his secret weapon. He didn't need every day to be great. He just needed to make it a little better than the day before. And that mindset, gentle but firm, kept him going. He also learned to pause when he was overwhelmed, to breathe, to remind himself, you don't have to do it all. Just do what you can. This was self-compassion, and it was powerful, because it gave him room to grow without pressure. And growth without pressure feels like freedom. The more Alex honored his small efforts, the stronger they became. He wasn't racing anymore. He was rebuilding, not a sprint, not a burst, but a steady human pace, one that he could actually live with. And through it all, he kept asking better questions. What helps me start? What pulls me off track? What matters most today? The answers weren't always clear, but the habit of asking kept him grounded. That's how change was happening now. Quiet, daily, real. Not by fighting laziness, but by understanding it. Not by chasing perfection, but by choosing direction. And Alex, once lost in delay, was becoming someone who knew how to move forward, even on the hard days. With each passing week, Alex's habits became steadier. What once felt like a huge effort now began to feel natural, even automatic. He no longer had to convince himself to start every day. He had systems that worked for him, not against him. But just when things were finally starting to feel stable, life threw something new his way. His part-time job increased his hours without warning. Suddenly, his careful routines were disrupted. He had less time, less rest, and more pressure. At first, he panicked. He feared falling back into old patterns. The voice returned, "You won't keep this up. You'll slip again." But this time, Alex did something different. He paused. Instead of trying to keep everything exactly the same, he asked himself a better question. What's the most important thing I can still do today? He focused on that. Sometimes it was a 10-minute stretch. Sometimes just one clear decision made early in the day. He learned to scale down without giving up. He adjusted instead of abandoning. That flexibility became his strength. On days when he had no time, he focused on clarity, not more tasks, just clearer thinking. He would take 5 minutes in the morning to ask, what will help me feel proud tonight? That one question helped him prioritize. It kept him connected to his effort, even in the chaos. He also talked to a mentor, an older coworker who had been through tough periods of burnout. The mentor told him something that stayed in his mind. Balance is not about doing everything. It's about choosing the right things to carry. Alex wrote that down. He started carrying less, but carrying better. He protected his time for sleep, for reflection, for one small act of progress each day. Even when the rest of the day was hectic, those small actions anchored him. He wasn't trying to win every moment anymore. He was just trying not to lose himself in the noise. And by doing that, he discovered a deeper layer of discipline. It wasn't about working harder. It was about remembering who he wanted to become, especially when things got hard. Even with pressure, even with less time, Alex stayed connected to his goal, building a life with intention. He no longer feared stress the same way. He had faced the storm and kept walking. And in that, he found confidence, not in being perfect, but in showing up anyway. That, he realized, was the real meaning of taking control. As time passed, the changes in Alex's life became visible not just to him, but to the people around him. His posture improved. His eyes looked clearer. He walked with more purpose. People began to ask him, "What's your secret?" He smiled and said, "I stopped waiting." But the truth was deeper than that. Alex had built something stronger than routine. He had built trust with himself. He could now rely on his own actions, not just his intentions. He knew how to restart after falling off track. He understood that the path to self-control was built on small, honest steps, not giant leaps fueled by motivation. This new mindset led to unexpected growth. He started helping others who were going through the same struggles. He didn't preach or pretend to have all the answers. He just shared his story, his tools, and most importantly, his belief that change is possible. One of his friends, Maya, had been dealing with similar habits. She would watch productivity videos and feel inspired, only to fall back into frustration. When she spoke to Alex, she expected advice like try harder or wake up earlier. Instead, he said, start with one thing and forgive yourself often. Those words stuck with her. Over time, Maya began to shift too. Seeing her progress reminded Alex of his own journey. and it reinforced one of the biggest lessons he had learned: growth multiplies when shared. By helping others, he deepened his own commitment. He joined a small accountability group where people shared daily wins and setbacks. Sometimes, all someone needed was a message that said, "I did one thing today." That one sentence often carried more power than pages of goals. Because consistency is contagious. Alex also discovered new interests. As his mind became clearer and his energy more stable, curiosity returned. He started reading again, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He explored topics like psychology, time management, and creativity. He wasn't just trying to fix himself anymore, he was beginning to expand. This was a new phase of his journey, from recovery to growth. And it was just as rewarding. He began planning his days with purpose, not pressure. Each evening, he would write down one thing that made him proud and one thing he could improve. It kept him grounded without making him rigid. His habits were no longer about escaping laziness. They were about building a life he liked coming back to. This transformation didn't make him immune to bad days. He still had moments of doubt, fatigue, and resistance. But he had tools now, real tools. He didn't fight his old self with force. He replaced it with care, patience, and small wins. That's how lasting change really works. It's not about crushing the past. It's about creating a present that feels better to live in. And for Alex, that's exactly what was happening, one clear decision at a time. By now, Alex had become someone he hardly recognized, not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet confidence he carried each day. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't always on top of everything, but he was showing up. And that made all the difference. He had gone from feeling like time was slipping through his fingers to feeling like he was finally shaping his life. He still remembered the days when even brushing his teeth felt like a battle. Now he started mornings with a clear intention, often writing a short note to himself. "You don't have to do it all, just do something." These notes became his anchors, a conversation with a part of him that used to give up. And slowly that part began to trust. One afternoon, while walking through the park, Alex saw a younger student sitting alone, shoulders slumped, staring at his phone with that same heavy expression he once wore. Alex didn't interrupt him, but he recognized the look, the weight of wanting to change but not knowing how. And in that moment, he realized something profound. His story could be someone else's spark. All those early battles, those tiny victories, that long, patient rebuilding, it was bigger than just him now. Because real transformation doesn't end when you fix your own life. It begins again when you use that experience to help someone else. Alex continued learning, growing, and helping quietly. He started a small blog where he shared stories of his journey. He wasn't chasing attention. He was offering hope, the kind that starts in silence and grows with action. His life wasn't a perfect productivity chart. Some weeks were slower than others, some goals shifted or paused, but the direction was steady. He had learned how to reset without shame, how to forgive delay but not surrender to it. He knew that motivation might come and go, but systems, self-respect, and small steps, those stayed. And every morning he returned to that one question: what's one thing I can do today that moves me forward? Not 5 things, not everything, just one. That mindset had changed everything. By the end of the year, Alex wasn't just more productive. He was more at peace, more present, more in control. Because he had done the hardest thing, he had learned to lead himself. And in that quiet leadership, he found freedom. Not from responsibility, but from the fear of failing before even starting. So if you're still in that place where even small steps feel like mountains, let this story remind you. You don't have to fix everything today, but you can begin. And beginning, no matter how small, is what separates dreaming from doing. Just one act, just one moment of effort, that's where real change lives. And like Alex, you might just look back one day and realize you weren't lazy after all. You were just waiting for the right kind of start. Now it's here, and it's yours to take. Thank you for staying with Alex through his story. If you saw a part of yourself in him, in the doubts, the delays, or the quiet wish to begin, then this message is for you too. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need a full plan. You just need one small reason to start. One action. One quiet commitment to yourself that says, "Today I move forward." The journey won't always be easy, but it will be worth it, and you won't be walking it alone. Thousands of others are right here with you, learning, trying, getting back up. If you're ready to keep growing, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this. Stories that teach you English, but also teach you about life, mindset, and growth. Leave a comment below. What's one small thing you'll do today to take control of your time? We'd love to hear from you. And maybe your story will inspire someone else. Until next time, keep going, because small steps create big change.